Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. This is Joel Simmons for yet another EarthWorks podcast. And today I'm very excited to have an icon of the industry and a gentleman that I give a lot of credit to my success and somebody that I've had a lot of respect for a very long time. And those of you that are in the St. Louis marketplace probably know the name Steve Dickinson. Steve, when I met you, you were the president, owner, chief bottle washer, and truck driver probably of Supreme Turf in St. Louis. I don't even know. We probably met in the late 90s, didn't we?
Probably so, yeah.
You and I met through an organization called ITOTA, which is the Independent Turf and Ornamental Distributors Association.
Correct, right.
Hard to say, but a great.
That started in 1990.
Now, you were one of the originals of ITOTA, right?
I was, yes.
Wow, that's impressive. When I got into the business, my dear friend Mike Fisher actually asked me to join, and I got to meet you guys. I met a lot of great people that I became friends with and business partners with, like Don Nauman, who unfortunately you know well, and Chris Peterson, who we have great respect for, and obviously Mike and a whole bunch of other people. But it was a really wonderful, and it's still active. So, I mean, I don't want to say it was, because it still is. But certainly in my day, that organization was just exceptional, and it really brought to the table training that we didn't have in other ways. And again, I have to say, I thank you, and I commend you for getting together with a group of independent business people. So just so everybody understands a little bit about the vision which you were part of, how did that even start? What was how did that even get together? Who got together? How did it happen?
Well, I think what happened there originally was we had a few manufacturers pitting one of us against the other one and saying, you're not doing this, and so is doing that, and you need to get with the program, and so on and so forth. So we kind of had some discussions about, with a couple of us back and forth, and he said, we need to get together and form a little group and see if we can't get a little better dialogue. That's kind of how it all started. So we got together in Hilton Head, South Carolina, on a big round circle table, and what we wanted to do was throw the manufacturer right in the middle of that circle and have at him, and we did a few times.
So wonderful.
So you weren't one of those, luckily.
No, I was a baby back then. What year was that? You said that, but what year was it? 1990. Okay. I was literally just getting into business in 19, and we started in 88, but really started hitting the street about 90. So this was all new at the time, but so it became really a group of independent distributors, and mostly small companies, right? I mean, weren't you guys all fairly, local, small, independent? And
we are. Everyone was. Yes.
Yeah. Which was where again, where I cut my teeth was with companies like yours and independents that had the vision and the wherewithal to really kind of focus their attention on helping superintendents and turf managers really grow. When I got into ITOTA, it really wasn't so much a distributor manufacturer thing. It was really became a professional training organization. And I remember we had Sandler Sales in there a number of times. And a whole bunch of great speakers. You hosted it. I remember maybe one of the first times I met you, you had hosted it in your shop in St. Louis. I mean, they used to dance. They used to bring everybody around to whoever the president was got to host one of the meetings. But man, I'll tell you, I have always and always will. And matter of fact, I went to a ITOTA meeting about a year ago, and I shared this, but it really helped build my career. I mean, think about it from our standpoint. A lot of people that you had hired, salespeople and people in the other groups, that never really had proper sales training. And this was an opportunity for us to get together and do some sales training. So, it was
very good.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, and you must have had some great friendships out of all that.
Oh, we still do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you and I got a chance to chat a little bit. I convinced you or encouraged you perhaps, and I'm sure a lot of other people did, to come out to Phoenix this year, which was great because I hadn't seen you in a long time. But we got a chance to sit down and chat a little bit, and I guess you got to run into a whole bunch of those guys, right?
That was great. Yeah, it was absolutely great. Dude, so good to see Chris Peterson and to see Mike and Billy Flurry. It was just and of course Don Nauman. He and I have been pals forever and ever.
I'm sorry about that. I'm sure
I
therapy can help you. I'm sure you can get over that if you work hard.
I hear you.
We're all trying to, I think.
I knew Don before I knew Itoda, so that goes back.
Oh boy, that's we're talking about Don Nauman, who is the owner of Sierra Pacific in the San Francisco Bay Area and is a dear friend. But and of course I'm kidding. But let's talk about so you got into the business. I want to hear your stories and what it was like in the beginning of your career. I mean, you told me just a minute ago you started with Cushman in 1969. Was that your first job in the turf industry?
It was my first job, and
so you were selling metal.
What happened was, and it's interesting, I had graduated Bailey Technical School and gone to work there as a mechanic. Okay, then became service manager and superintendent of parts and service then for a bit. And my boss talked me into going into sales in 1974, and I said, "Well, I don't want to be no salesman. Them guys never work, And he said, "Well, I know, but you do, So, So anyway, I said, "I don't think I want to." And he said, "Well, I'd like to double your salary and let you try it." And I said,
well, let me think about that.
Let me think about that for about 4 seconds,
Yeah.
And so I gave it a whirl. And what intrigued me about it is we had 2 product lines at the time in the chemicals. We had the W.A. Cleary line and we had the Tuco line, the Upjohn company. And I was amazed at how 3 little canisters of Actidown TGF treated dollar spot on an acre of ground. I just found that amazing, So I got to talking to superintendents about that, one thing and another, and they started kind of sharing some of the. And I said, "Well, does this stuff always work?" And they said, "No, not always." And I said, "What do you do to reapply it?" I said, "Wow, I like this, So
true salesman already. You were already in.
Reapply it, So that's what got me interested in it, and I just, So then the job at Cushman ended because Cushman golf carts went out of business, and I wound up with an opportunity to manage professional turf specialists in the St. Louis area, which they came out of Bloomington, Illinois, and so I did that for 8 years, and during that time, really learned the turf business, and
you were a salesman. You were a salesman for professional turf.
Yeah. Yes, and so then I got some awesome opportunities to go some short turf classes at Purdue and Michigan State and places like that, and met people like Joe Vargas and
we just lost, unfortunately.
We just lost him. Al Turgeon and John Street helped me out a lot. Bill Lobenstein from the University of Missouri helped me way back when to understand the soil report.
Wow.
And taught me to manage the CEC rather than to worry about the pH and the pH and get itself together.
Of crap, Steve. You know that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So that's how I learned how to interpret a soil report and try to interpret it back to the superintendent who also, didn't know those things. Most of them did not,
So is that when you started calling yourself the soil doctor?
Well, that's when they started calling me the doctor.
Okay.
Back in 1985, we had a real tough summer, and we had a round table discussion, and people were talking about they had talked to Dr. So and they had talked to Dr. So and so about their problem, one thing and another. And then one guy got up and he said, "Well, when I have a problem, I call the Dr. Supreme. He comes over and fixes it." And everybody laughed.
Tell me about that, because you're talking now what, mid 80s, right? And you're
80s,
talking,
yeah.
I mean, I was, I think at that time I was a young county agent and looking at pH on a soil test before I even really understood how to read a soil test. But what was it like? What was soil testing like? What was soil chemistry like? What were they talking about? I mean, we've been, beat up pretty badly over my career over, looking at something other than pH. Was it bad then?
Yeah. Well, and the problem of it is most all the reports we got back then were ag reports.
Yeah.
not turf reports.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a difference,
Oh,
and, what you put on cotton and corn, you don't put on turf grass,
I hope not.
So, yeah.
Or you'd be growing
So
cotton and corn, probably.
yeah, that's right. So, but we try to keep the salts out of turf, not worry about it, corn and beans,
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, but so
So what was it
that's
like?
well, our soils here vary in Missouri and Southern Illinois vary a lot between hard old red clay that you can't hardly do anything with, and some good tillable organic soil, and some sandy loam as well,
Yeah.
So got a lot of difference in this little old two-state area,
Yeah,
So
you have a very big widespread of there. And they weren't building greens out of sand at that point, were they, or were they?
nah, they were just starting back in
Okay.
those days.
So
Yeah, right.
early 80s was when the
Mhm.
USGA kind of spec'd this sand thing. So you were really
Right.
working on soils.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My original work was all soil greens. There was very few sand greens, and
Yeah.
then people started top dressing heavy, air finding top dressing heavy with sand. And I had some superintendents had built up 4 to 5 inches of sand in 10 years time,
Lovely.
and they had a better green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got some drainage, some air.
Yes. Yeah. Sure did. And some roots.
Yeah, what a concept. Yeah, roots.
Roots that didn't have pythium.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
was the reception from the superintendents when you were coming in and I mean, it sounds to me, and I know you well enough, and you and I have had this conversation, that you were kind of talking a little different talk than most folks were talking. You weren't talking pH. What
Well,
was the
I was.
reception like?
Yeah. Uh, it was different looks.
Yeah, I
Well,
bet.
what do you mean? And I'd tell them what I meant. I said, if we balance the cation exchange capacity, the pH would be 6.8. And I said, you can quit friggin', worrying about the lime and the sulfur.
Yeah.
That's not what we need to worry about.
Yeah.
And so then they would just seem to be open and listening. And I said, here's the program. I said, I learned it from Bill Lobenstein, and he was a well-respected man from University of Missouri. And he'd learned what he'd learned from Dr. Albrecht, who was also there. And it started making sense to them. And so they started listening to me, so.
Had you ever met Dr. Albrecht?
No, never did. No.
He was gone by the time you got into this sector of the business?
Probably so. Bill's the only person I ever knew there.
But Bill actually worked under Dr. Albrecht?
Yes. Yeah. Bill was the extension agent.
Oh, okay. That's right. I'd
Yeah.
forgotten that. I'm sorry. And I
Yeah.
should know that, being a former extension agent.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
So just so I can clarify that for those who don't know, Dr. Albrecht is really kind of the grandfather of cation exchange, base saturation, if you will. And it's always had its controversy. I think you and I would completely agree on this. I've been working with that model for my entire career, 37, 8 years. It's never failed me on soil. It doesn't work on sand, and we know that. And that's, I think, where the big controversy comes in, because on low CEC soils, it's not. But you had to be one of the early pioneers in that. I mean, this is this is the backbone of what Acres USA talks about, and of course, Dr. Albrecht, has written number of books. You'll appreciate this. We were at a seminar. Kevin Hicks and I were giving a virtual seminar, and then questions were asked, and then somebody chimed in and said, the question was, well, since they've proven that base saturation doesn't work, and I'm like, whoa, excuse me? I don't think anybody's proven anything of the sort.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't work on sand, and that's, of course, USGA's focus. But so you're talking this kind of, mumbo jumbo back in the 80s.
Yeah, in the 80s.
You must have been the biggest heretic. I mean, I thought I was the biggest heretic, but you must have been really shot. So, well, of course, but this is interesting because you were there before they even came out with the sand spec. So, was it a fairly accepted practice, or was there still the kind of controversy that we still battle with what you were preaching back then?
Well, I didn't find a lot of controversy over it, because I just said, this works. Let me show you it does. And let's make these corrections. And we did, and it worked. And then everybody said, hey, get a hold of this guy if you really want somebody that can interpret a soil report. And that's how it kind of all got started. And
so
I still get calls today.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear
I've been retired 15 years.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that long, Steve.
Yeah, it's been
I'm
that
very
long since I saw you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm very jealous, actually.
yeah.
It's there's a certain
It
level of jealousy in that.
it is
Let
the
me
best job I ever had, and I've had some good ones in my
Oh,
time.
I can imagine, I can imagine. Let me go back to the very beginning. So let me go back to when you first started in a sales role. What was
Okay,
that like for you? I mean, you were obviously, a young man, and like you said, you weren't sure the sales was what you wanted to do. But talk
right.
about what that experience was like.
Mm.
Tell me, your first couple of months on the job. I mean, was it frightening? Were you getting a lot of pushback? Were people receptive? What was it
It's
like for you? Do you
it
remember?
was. Yeah, I do remember whenever my boss, who was Tom Fox at the time, talked me into going into sales, and I told him that I didn't want to be a salesman, and he said, "You already are." And
Right.
I, he,
Everybody
s-
is.
he said, every time somebody comes in here to buy a golf car, you sell them, you send them home with one. And I said, well, that's what they came for. He said, I
Right.
know, but you explain it in a way that they like it and they leave with it and happy as they can be. And he said, you need to be doing this on a wide basis. He said,
Wait, you were
so
helping people? That's what you were saying? I mean, that's the secret there?
yeah,
It's just
okay. So I said, so we made a deal because I really liked being the superintendent of parts and service. I really did. So I said, okay, I'll make you a deal. I said, I'll take the job. And I said, in 90 days, I said, if I don't like it or you don't like what I'm doing, then you give my job back as superintendent of parts and service. He said, deal, you're on.
perfect.
So take
No,
it. So January
win-win.
1st, 1974, I start off. In the first quarter of that year, I increased sales by 20% over the previous year.
Wow.
And I was hooked,
So what was the
and
environment
everybody
like? What you were
loved.
working with golf course superintendents mostly?
Yes, well, both pros and superintendents. I was selling turf trucksters and those sort of things, equipment to the superintendent, and then I was selling golf carts to the pros.
Oh, wow.
So
So
I,
you were
yeah,
doing a little bit of both. So Cushman
back.
had some soft goods. They had Clearys and Upjohn, and so you would talk to the
Good, no,
superintendents about.
Cushman didn't. Cushman didn't. The Wheezy Cushman, the distributor, did have
Oh, I see.
the
Yeah,
distributor I worked for. Yes,
that's
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Cushman himself did not.
I
Yeah,
understood that.
so
So
yeah,
what was it like? You're going into the superintendent's office now for the first time. What was that
right.
like? That in 1974. I mean, I'm a
Well,
junior in high school, so you know,
yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know anything, and I don't mean
the
to. I'm
first,
not trying to age this, anything. I'm just trying to get a perspective. That fascinates me. That what was that? What was the culture of our industry like back then?
well, it was pretty tight.
I can
and
imagine.
and I walked into the first superintendent who helped me a lot during the years. Jim Manka was at Old Warson Country Club, and I said, "Could I see the greenskeeper?"
Oh my.
And he looked at me kind of funny. He said, "Son, there is no greenskeepers anymore." He said, "We're golf course superintendents, and
There you
don't
go.
call us greenskeepers." And I said, "Oh, my first day, really nice." So I
Perfect.
said, "Well, I said I didn't know that." I said, "I'm glad to know that though, and I won't make that mistake again." And I kind of chuckled, and he kind of chuckled. And he says, "Why don't you sit down?" So I sat down and told him about myself and what I was doing and one thing and another. And he said, "Well, I love Cushman stuff." He said, "We can do some business together." And he
Perfect.
took me to lunch. Yeah,
Wow. First day.
yeah. After I called him a greenskeeper,
You insulted him and he still bought you
I
lunch.
took me to lunch. Yeah,
And I
and
assume you guys became pretty close friends over
we
the years.
became yeah we became very good friends over the years.
How
Yeah.
long was
So
he in the business since after that day? I mean, was he there?
oh, let me see. That would have been 75. I'm thinking he was probably in until about 90 when he retired.
Okay.
90, 1990, be my guess. Yeah. And he's
So
passed on now, but great guy.
so you're at that time, so mid 70s, what were, the superintendents what were their backgrounds? I mean,
Well,
there were no schools, right?
there weren't any schools. Most of them were very old school,
Yeah,
still
I bet.
sprayed greens with a rubber hose in their hand,
Oh
and
boy.
a gun, a handgun on the end of it. So, and they fogged it on there pretty good. So none of them knew what calibration of a sprayer was. They just knew how much water that tank held and how many tanks it took to spray that
And
golf
they
course.
covered the grass and
Yeah, that was pretty
yeah.
much it.
What were conditions like? I mean, what were the conditions? I mean, you're a golfer. I loved your comment last night. Yeah, I can do this podcast, but I got a 2 o'clock tee time. I love
Yeah,
that. So we had to move it up in the morning so you could make your tea time. But what were conditions like? I mean, you've gone through enough of years in this business to see conditioning change radically.
yeah. Well,
But what was it
mostly,
like in 74? I mean, any idea what the height of cut was? What was,
yeah, sure. It was tall, and the only thing that was pretty much, except for a country club, the only thing that was even looked at was greens and tees.
yeah.
Fairways weren't even an issue, and
Did
they
they
were
spray
most of them.
fairways? Did they try to
No,
control
oh no, oh no, no, no.
nothing?
They didn't have
Yeah.
variation, much less
Oh, so they didn't
spray.
even get the water.
No, hell no. But then all of a sudden, a few more golf courses kind of hit the line, and they had better tees and better greens, and so then all of a sudden, the guys who didn't have decided if they were going to have some play, they were going to have to step up the game. So they started building new tees, and then all of a sudden, the irrigation came into the factor, and now we irrigating around the trees, the tees and greens, and could have turf all summer,
Wow.
and then it wasn't long they started irrigating fairways, and
So
then
the
that started
competition level was strong, even
yeah.
among superintendent. Now, we're at that time when you got into the business in mid 70s. Were the superintendent, was there camaraderie? Were there associations? Were they getting together talking, or was it competitive?
They were both. I mean, they were both competitive. There were some non-talkers. I've got a secret I'm not about to tell you.
Right.
You know, yeah. Oh yeah, there was some of that, and there was a couple of different superintendent associations at the time. The ones who didn't get along with one belonged to the other one, and
Okay.
yes,
Nothing's
and
changed.
nothing.
Yeah.
That's how it started. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the ones that didn't agree with the one started another one, and they're both still surviving today.
What
You
were the
know,
association meetings like back in the first years of your sales experience?
well, they were they were great meetings. They were golf in the afternoon, and then we dressed to the nines for dinner
Yeah.
and have a
Coat and,
great
coat and
speaker.
tie?
Yeah,
Yeah.
coat and tie.
In the
Yeah,
clubhouse
in the clubhouse.
yeah,
Yep, yep.
of course.
And have a wonderful dinner and have a wonderful speaker.
So there was
Every
always
month.
a speaker. Was there a meeting before golf or no?
Um,
And like a
no,
chapter meeting?
right. They'd have their own board meetings
Okay.
normally at a different time than the golf was. They would say if they were going to meet on the second Tuesday, that they might have their board meeting on the second Monday or something. Which was a meeting just of the board themselves.
But the vendors were there. You were there, and manufacturers were
Yeah,
there.
for the superintendent meeting, yes, we were invited to come. Yes.
Were you asked to sponsor? Was that part of the process back in?
No, I
No,
don't.
it was all
I
member driven.
no, I don't remember that being a part of it. You paid your dues and that was it.
What
And
was the networking like then? Was it still fairly friendly? And I mean, people were chatting up and saying, "Hey, I have this problem. You guys seen anything?" I mean, what was the conversation back and forth among supers like?
it was pretty quiet.
Was it really?
Pretty quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
A neighbor might help a neighbor, but to go across town, it didn't happen.
so they weren't swapping equipment or tractors or anything like that at the time.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that. I'm concerned about my own job, and I don't want somebody else getting it, and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Yeah, and there certainly was that part of it.
So you left that job and you went to professional turf, better opportunity, I assume. I mean, you were now
Well, yes,
entrenched in sales.
what excited me about it was they were basically really in the chemical business,
Yeah.
and I had two lines, and I didn't really have enough to service anybody with, except my service to superintendents then in those days was more equipment wise than it was chemical wise. Although I did sell a fair amount of the Ecodone product and the Cleary's products as well, but it wasn't enough to service the superintendent
Right.
who, if he didn't buy from the big distributor, may not get the next order. It
Right.
was
Right.
it
Right.
was that it was that tight. Yeah. So, but
So you take a
anyway,
jump, you go to professional turf, and you got a big line, I assume.
yeah, I had a complete chemical line, and had the Diamond Shamrock line, had Mellencrot line, which was in St. Louis, and they were, I mean, that was pretty big product line back in those days, and so I wound up with that and Cleary's and Seebegagians, all the good things,
Big guys, yeah.
Diamond Shamrock, all the good things that we needed. I had it all of a sudden,
What
Then it
about
became a different
fertilizers?
game.
What did you have for that?
Well, had Parex in its infancy,
Okay.
and yeah, it burnt greens the first year out. So when I'd come around and try to sell Parex, they'd look at me with cross eyes. Are
Yeah.
you kidding me? you know,
Oops.
but yeah, oops. So it went through that battle. Finally got everybody using Parex.
Got it back.
Yeah, got it back where it needed to be. So yeah. So
Is that where you started to learn the soils? Was that when did they send you back to schools? I mean, when did you start getting back into, or when did you start the turf?
Well, what happened? What got me into soils was I would go talk to a superintendent, and he'd say, "You have a 1959 bird green product?" I said, "Yeah, sure do." Well, why don't you go ahead and bring me, 10 ton out? And I said, "Okay." I said, "Do you use that all over?" Well, yeah. And I said, "Why?" He said, well, why not? I said, "Well, I'm just asking." I said, "Does it work the same all over?" No, not now that you mention it, not really. There's some places it doesn't work as well. I said, "How long has it been since you've done a soil test?" A what? A soil test. Oh, I don't know.
What?
A long time ago.
The fertilizer wasn't working well.
No. Well, yeah, it wasn't working the same all over. That was my point.
Yeah.
And so let's do some soil tests. And we did, and found it to be deficient, made the corrections, and all of a sudden they look better.
The fertilizer worked better too, didn't it?
The fertilizer worked better. So then one superintendent would tell another superintendent, and another superintendent. He'd ask me, "Hey, I heard you did a soil test for so and so over there. Would you do one for me?" Sure.
So go back just a step, Steve. So you were taking this out to the field, but when did you start to learn this? Did that company send you off to school, or did you just start to work with the county agent that really
I
started?
started working with the county agent, Bill
Okay.
Oglesby. Yeah.
So
never
you were
went.
working with Bill, and you were working with the university soil test?
Yes. Yes, it was.
And so what were you looking at? Just calcium, magnesium primarily? I mean, is that the big change?
And yeah, basically calcium, magnesium, and when Bill told me, how to balance the CECs rather
Right.
than looking at the pH all the time, So, but nobody else was.
What year is this now?
I would say it would have been in the late 70s.
Okay, so you're now coming in with this heresy of balancing the soil chemistry, and nobody had
Right.
heard anything, but you're seeing results, and you're making changes, and you're actually making their fertilizer better. I'd be willing to bet, and you can confirm this, is that you probably allowed them to reduce some of their inputs, didn't you?
Yeah, well, yeah. What I try to do is get them to use a better fertilizer.
Well, that's even better.
It costs more money.
Yeah, exactly.
And it worked even better.
So at that time, superintendents weren't doing much in the way of soil testing. This was all
No, hardly.
Okay.
Yeah,
And the university system wasn't even preaching soil testing back in the mid 70s.
no.
Wow.
Here's the thing about the university. Okay, the university, especially the University of Missouri, and I don't want to take anything away from them, a great school, but they're an ag school.
Yeah.
They're not
Well,
a turf school.
as all land grant schools are. They're
Land
all
grant
ag
schools are,
yeah.
right? Yeah, and they just don't put a lot of emphasis on turf, and still don't do a lot today. University of Missouri had some pretty good turf guys that always wind up going somewhere else.
Right. Well, that seems to be the case in all the industry.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah.
So how long did it take for this to become? I mean, I when I met you, I knew you as the soil doctor, and I was intrigued because I was kind of going down the same road, but I was, I didn't know many people that knew this as well as you did. So when you and I first met, I'm like, wow, this guy actually gets this. This is kind of scary. But how long did it take of you going around and talking to these guys and about soil testing before it really took off and you became the soil
Well,
person?
I'd say 5 or 6 years,
Really?
because most people still had the old adage of all I got to do is balance my pH.
Right.
And that's, I'm going to balance your pH.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it differently than you would. I'm not going to throw all that sulfur on there that you think that you need.
Were
That
you
you think you
selling the sulfur at the time?
No. Well, we had it, but I tried not to sell it. I said,
But your company would have been the guys selling it and
yeah, sure,
would have been
yeah,
selling the limestone if you needed to
yeah,
lower or to raise, I
exactly,
mean, excuse me.
right, yeah, exactly,
So, that's one of the great criticisms. Oh, well, you're just trying to sell sulfur. And well, no, I'm not. First of all, I don't sell
yeah,
either. And
yeah.
besides, I mean, you tell me this, did you guys make any money really selling sulfur or selling limestone? Was that ever
No,
really a
hell no.
profitable? Yeah. I mean, it was never really, you were not going to make a living selling either one of those. They were just
No,
a necessity to a means or a means to an end to get to where you wanted
yeah.
to. But as you come in, you start talking this balancing model, and now you're doing it for the right reasons. Talk about the physics. What happened physically to the soil when you started making these changes?
I didn't notice much difference until we started using organics, and then I started seeing the difference in the soil structure up at that point,
You
and
start bringing in some
balancing the
carbon. Yeah.
CEC. I didn't see much, and as far as soil structure goes, differently.
Yeah. So what were the early organics and what years was this?
The early organics were only Milorganite.
Yeah.
Everybody used tons and tons and tons of it,
Yeah.
And the one thing that I always equated with the Milorganite, the more Milorganite people used, the more Poanya they had.
Oh,
It was
really? Uh,
it was hand in hand. Yeah,
why? Do
yeah.
you know?
I don't know why, but I
Yeah.
don't know whether it was, something where they put Poanya seeds in that Milorganite bag or not,
Maybe they
I'm
didn't
sure.
digest out of, yeah, who knows? I don't
Yeah,
think people
but
were
it
eating
it was
grass,
it
but
it was a definitely, and of course they
yeah.
didn't. I'm kidding, but it was definitely there was definitely a correlation there. The golf courses that used a lot of Milorganite had a lot of Poanya.
When and I don't mean this to
And
sound self-serving, but I'd love to hear your perspective. When did the organic market start to change and come into different products and newer products?
I would probably say, going back trying to think about years, probably not till about 1990
Yeah.
or so. Yeah, they were when I started in '83. Milorganite was still the ticket, you know,
And yeah,
and
and a lot. So 1990 was when you started Supreme Turf.
'83.
I'm sorry,
Well,
83.
80,
So you were
right.
already
So,
well into that. So
right.
let me just back up a little bit and talk about that. So you left professional turf, a distributor, and you started Supreme Turf on
Supreme
your
Turf.
own, or were you with a partner at the time? I don't even know.
Yeah, my partner Mary.
Oh, that's your life partner. Perfect.
My partner
Yes.
Mary.
Yes. Perfect.
I had
Uh,
a partner.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I absolutely. And she was a wonderful partner. So in
Yes, she
83, you
was.
guys started you just went out on your own and you started your own
Yep.
distribution. What was that like? I mean, what was that had to be a frightening change and a big risk. I mean, that's a big risk taker.
Well, I didn't risk anything, just my house and car.
Oh, that's all. That's it.
That's not a risk,
And Mary was okay with it. That's the
He
amazing thing.
was. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Did you have kids at the time?
Yeah, we had two boys. Yeah.
Oh boy, so
So
you're risking
they
them
were they
too.
were they
Oh,
were they were teenagers. Yeah.
well,
13 and
free
6.
labor. Perfect. You were
Yeah,
telling me that
well,
story.
hey, it wasn't free. I paid them $2 an hour.
Perfect.
Yeah,
How kind
wasn't
of you.
free. That's
Yeah.
right. That's
Thanks,
right.
Dad. Yeah. Yeah. And they
Yeah,
probably worked their tail off too, didn't they?
yeah, they did.
But look at them now, for goodness sake. They've
That's
done
right.
well.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So
Right.
let me stay on that other track though, and then I'll come back to the Supreme situation because that's where I met you. But so around 1990, you started to see organic fertilizers change a little bit. What were
I
you guys
started
doing?
starting more of them come online.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you guys pick up one or two?
Yeah, I did. Just didn't have that kind of success with it. I
Yeah.
had, I think the first one I had was that turkey compost or manure, or
Sustain?
whatever it was, sustain. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Had that, and then a couple of others. I can't remember the
Well,
name
there's
of them. And
Ringer at
then
the time. There's Emerald Isle.
Ringer,
Roots
right?
was out there. I think
Had
you guys had
had
Roots, right?
Ringer probably showed me the most um, benefit until I got a hold of EarthWorks.
Okay. Well, like I said,
Yeah,
I'm not trying to make
and
this a sales
yeah,
pitch.
and
I'm really curious of the history.
replenishes my product. I mean, I wouldn't use anything else on my own yard, and it looks awesome all the time.
Well, thank you
But
very much. And again,
replenish will change the soil structure,
yeah,
and I
it
never
definitely
had
does
that
that.
happen. I
Yeah.
never had that happen with Ringer. Ringer was
Yeah.
pretty decent. I was
And Ringer, I don't even know if Ringer's still in business, but they were a meal-based product. So they were blood meal, bone
oh
meal, feather
yes,
meal,
blood
things
meal,
of
bone
that
meal, feather
nature.
meal. Right,
And obviously
right.
Milorganite is
Yeah,
rock
is what
solid.
it is.
Yeah, it is
Milwaukee
what it
beer.
is. And the
Right.
problem with that material is it's been pasteurized and the carbon is kind of get burned off. When we got into the business about that time, Ringer was there. Roots
Mm-hmm.
was there, so they were selling humic acids.
Mm-hmm.
Bill and his son were selling Emerald Isle and the kelp meals, and so there was a beginning of an industry, and then Jerry and I came in and kind of brought it all. We kind of combined everything because we're not a waste management company, but then you started to really see a lot of folks change. But it was 25 years, and you and I have had this conversation, but it was probably 25 years before we see what we're seeing now. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you see this as much, having enjoyed a retirement life, but the whole carbon-based fertility has really just taken off. I mean, it's on fire. If you walked around in Phoenix, as I know you did, you probably saw a dozen companies that you might not have ever known of,
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
that
Right.
were
Yeah.
selling along this thing. So let's talk about Supreme. What was that like? You start your own business in 1983. The industry was still, it was still different than it is now. What was the industry like as now you're a business owner? You brought when did you first bring on salespeople? Did you do it all yourself the first few years at Supreme?
Yeah. First 2 years. Yeah. Yeah.
So you were the lone wolf running around.
Yeah.
Mary and the boys were watching the shop, and
I was a salesman and delivery man.
yeah, I know that feeling. I used
Yeah.
to drive a Mack truck
Yeah.
myself, but
Yeah.
so what was it like? I mean, people knew you, so you had a
Yeah.
reputation. You were
Yeah.
already doing soils work at that time, is that right?
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
you
Yes.
already had
Yes.
some reputation. What was the industry like? What were superintendents like? Were schools were just starting to come on stream at that point, right? The turf
Right.
schools?
And yes, they were. And some of the older fellows were beginning to retire, and some of the younger guys taking their place, and more progressive thinkers, and more
Educated from the
yeah, and
turf
willing
school?
to try and willing to try different things. Where the old school guy was pretty much going to stay with what he was doing. You know,
There's still some
this
of that.
works. Yeah, there's still some of that. Yeah, this works. I'm not changing. So yeah, I've heard that a few times in my day.
Right, yes,
But
we all have,
the
right?
young, yeah, some of the older guys, and I have a lot of respect for the older guys. They as I do younger superintendents because they're working fools. I mean,
Oh yeah.
absolutely,
Well, that's the great
give it
thing
their
about our
best
industry.
7 days a week, and
Yeah.
God isn't always on their side.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the glory of what we do is we work with the hardest working people that are
Yeah,
dedicated and
absolutely.
committed. I mean, it just, when I first got into the industry, I was just overwhelmed to see the work ethic.
Oh yeah.
It's just amazing. A superintendent can finish the day and look out on the work that they did and see this beautiful, horticultural property and just, breathe deeply and,
Hmm.
and love what they're doing. I mean, it's wonderful. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't see
Yeah.
that in accounting or in law
No.
or
No.
anything else. You see it
No.
in our industry.
Yeah.
So talk about the changes. I mean, you've seen a lot of changes in the industry. So you're in Supreme Turf now. 1983. When did Supreme start to really take off, and when did you start bringing on sales reps?
Well, and I did it myself for 2 years, then brought on a sales rep, and started growing the business more and more. Hey, we had Supreme Turf for 22 years before we sold it to Dave Shields,
Mm-hmm.
and we had 22 years of stair-step growth. We
Oh
never had
wow.
a down year, and we built it from 700,000 to 7 million in 22 years.
Wow, that's fantastic.
and wound up with a total of 13 people, including Mary and I being two of
Yeah.
those people. So, but yeah, so.
And
And I
Mary
had
actually did quite a bit of work at the, I mean, she wasn't just a figurehead. She was
oh
working.
no, she was she was the office manager and in charge. I mean, period. So
In
you
charge
know
is the key
when
word there. Yeah.
that's right. When she needed something done, she'd come say, "Hey, Silver Tongue, you need to hit the road here. We need a little bit of cash. We
I
got
never
some
heard that name,
inventory.
Steve.
We got a little inventory, to excess inventory here, and we need some cash by the end of the month. So you can either go out and Silver Tongue them to death and get rid of it, or you can go to the bank and borrow some more money. What do you want to do?" That's how I see you.
Yeah. See you in a week. Yeah. And
See you in a week.
bring
See
back
you
the
in a week
cash,
is
pal.
right.
Yeah. We got to
That's
eat.
right.
Yeah. The boys need new shoes. Yeah.
It's right, boy, new shoes. That's right. Yeah.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
That's very funny. Were you able to instill in the salespeople that you had some of your agronomic knowledge?
Definitely. Yeah.
Good.
I wrote a book just for them on understanding soil reports.
Oh, wonderful. I didn't know that. I
And
don't know if I ever knew that.
and I put several pages of soil reports from different clubs that I had taken over the years and my recommendations based upon
Wow.
those reports. And so everybody had that booklet. So yes, they started understanding them better, and so yeah, they were pretty well versed in agronomically advising someone correctly. So.
So your business model was agronomic first. So they were really agronomists going around as consulting salespeople, right?
Sure, yeah. They all had ag business degrees, but but I taught them the turf business,
Yeah, I mean,
basically.
most of us that went to college, certainly in those days, we didn't learn the stuff that you're talking about or the stuff that I preach these days. I mean, we didn't learn that in
Right.
school. I mean, we learned
No.
pH, and
Right. Yeah.
you learn it fairly quickly that it doesn't completely work. I mean, it like you said. I mean, the favorite story that you just shared with us is, they put the same fertilizer on and it doesn't work the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
gee, shocking
Yeah.
how that works.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy. So what was the superintendent like in 1983 compared to what it was like 10 years earlier? I mean, how much you started talking about that, but how much changed? Give me a feeling for, that era and when the big changes started to really happen, and what were the big changes? I mean, what were the big things that
I think what I see the big changes with the younger guys coming on in the 80s,
yeah.
that they were better salespeople to their owners.
Wow.
And they are the ones that talk the owners into, let's improve this, let's do this, let's put some irrigation out here, adding a bunch of work to themselves, but yet they wanted to see the end result that could be not what they had to work with. And
So
so I think
so there was a
they
vision there then. They were
yeah,
starting to see a vision of what this could be.
I believe, yes, I sure do, and so then owners started listening to that, and said, well, we don't need to put all this cash in our pocket. I guess we could spend a little of it.
Yeah.
So
Improve. Yeah.
that's
Reinvest.
how, yeah. So they started seeing, small improvements, and then they want to turn it into a bigger improvement, and that's how it kind of just kept rolling.
What do you think started that? What do you think was the impetus of the superintendents coming and starting to wanting to make that change? Was there one reason? Was it when, were they all going to school and learning stuff, or was it just the competition?
I think no, I think it was the schooling that they did have, and so I saw a lot of I'm sure great pictures of beautiful golf courses,
Yeah.
and then they come to this place that looks, wow, this place could use a little bit of tuning up,
Yeah.
and I think that was the inspiration.
How long were superintendents holding their jobs at that time of the era?
Pretty good, pretty good. I mean, there wasn't a big turnover. There was always those handful of guys that had a resume as long as your arm, but they were few and far between.
Yeah.
I know superintendents were there for years and years.
Most of your career, you had guys at the same place.
Oh yeah.
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 What were some of the best golf courses you were working with in that St. Louis area? And your
Well,
favorites?
yeah, I
Maybe a
mean,
better question.
so many great ones.
There are great ones there. You have great
Yeah,
golf courses.
right. Yeah, yeah. Boone Valley's the number one men's club in town, out just a little bit out of town. And Belle Reve was always one of my
Yeah, Belle
favorites,
Reve was
and
always
was
great. It
a
still
good
is.
customer as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Old Larson is where I called the superintendent the greenskeeper. That's
Yeah.
still a great track. Algonquin. There's just so many. And they're all just as pristine as they can be.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So when did you sell Supreme? What year was that?
2005.
So, but you still kind of stuck around for a little bit after that. I
Right.
remember the
I worked.
transition.
Part of the contract was I worked for Dave for 5 years,
All
and I
right.
worked. I didn't work very hard, but I worked 10 days a month for 5 years, and
That's not
I
bad.
still, yeah, I still kept my Jeff City territory, and I sold about $700,000 or $800,000 a year, just be doing something, and it paid more than paid for my little pittance. So
What was the industry like in 2005 when you were making that transition out than when you started back in the 70s? I mean, how would you describe, and what was some of the most striking differences from the beginning of that career to when you started to transition out?
well, the most striking difference was number one, I think the quality of product that came along in that
Yeah.
time span. That's the most striking difference. And of course, it all came with a premium price
Yeah,
on it
no,
as well.
they're
And
built differently.
I getting people used to that or accustomed to that, was a bit of a challenge, but you just had to convince them that you're going to love the results.
And it's going to make your life
just
better and easier.
it's
And
just
yeah,
it's just an investment. And
yeah,
if you don't have a great place, they're not going to care much about you when you're going down the road. So let's
right,
spend some money
exactly.
and make it right,
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened.
I meant to ask you this, but when you got started in the 70s, what was, I mean, you may not know the answer to this, but what was an average budget on a golf
Oh,
course in the
it was
70s?
pretty low.
I would
I
think
would
so.
say, yeah, I
And
would
it's all
say
relative, admittedly, but still.
under a couple 100,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then when you left, you're talking pushing $1 million or
Oh,
hundreds
yeah.
of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were still some low budget courses, obviously, and some low budget 9-hole country clubs,
Yeah.
out in the outlying areas. But yeah, the better courses were up to $1 million, easy enough. Yeah.
I got to kind of start wrapping this up, but I wanted to ask you, I don't know if this is a fair question or not, but any great stories of things that just, stories that you love telling from the days of,
Yeah.
starting in this business? What are
Well,
some of the great, I know I've sat with you enough and drank with
there's
you a
been
few
plenty of
times.
good ones, the greatest one for me, again, we talked briefly about this earlier, in 1985 when we had that tough year, and we were sitting around talking about the problems that people had and the people they had talked to and over and so on and so forth, and everybody had Dr. So and so or Dr. So and so over, and one superintendent got up and said, when I have trouble with migraines, I had the Dr. Supreme come over and he takes care of it, and I never walked, and everybody laughed, and I never walked into a superintendent building after that I wasn't a doctor.
So
Hey, the doctor's here.
that was the beginning
Some
of
people
your
do not
medical
know my
service.
name. Some people do not know my name is Steve.
Yeah. Well,
The doctor's
doctor,
here.
I gotta thank you for you. Like I said, I mean, I have the utmost of respect. You treated me extremely well as a pup in the industry, and I will always have great respect. And I hope that you do make it back to the big show every year, or at least every couple of years, and come and visit with us, and join us for a beer on the floor at least, and
Yeah.
get to see
Do
everybody.
that
But
for sure.
yeah,
And
and so.
one of my greatest product lines of all time, though, was Replenish 545. It's still
Well,
my
thank you
favorite.
very much.
Probably always will be, and it changes soil structure. That's what I noticed about it.
It makes some things happen. It was our baby. It was the first thing that we did too back in 1988.
When you have soil that will not grow turf, you aerify the hell out of it and fill it full of ring with a replenish 545, and next year you'll have turf.
Amazing what will happen if you feed the microbes and do all the stuff that Mother Nature wants you to do.
It's all different in the world. Yeah.
Really.
You'll actually be able to get the soil probe in the ground.
Yes, exactly. So I hope you hit them straight and long this afternoon on the course.
Well, sure.
And I hope you have years and years of many times on the golf course. And I do look forward to catching up with you and maybe breaking bread and just catching up. But definitely try to come back out to the shows when you get a chance, please.
All right. Oh, it'd be a pleasure to do that. All right.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Sir.
And folks, that is the EarthWorks podcast. Please join us again next week. We will be back with somebody different, maybe not somebody quite as entertaining or informative as the doctor here, but again, please join us and subscribe to the EarthWorks podcast. And Steve, again, enjoy your day on the golf course. And again, I can't thank you for all your years of support and friendship.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Wish everybody the best out there. Keep on keeping it green, baby.
That's all we can do. Thank you so much.
You can do. That's right. You're welcome.